But Ohio State beating Texas in the Cotton Bowl 28-14. Ohio State, like I said, moving on to play Notre Dame in the national title game. Ohio State's first national title game in only 4 years. Not quite the 12 years Notre Dame had to wait, but still for Ohio State, 4 years for them is probably a pretty long time to wait for the
especially when they watch Michigan win one in between.
Oh, yeah. They've been chomping
feels like eternity.
They've been chomping at the bits to get back here right now, and they look unstoppable as of right now. Let's go over the highest graded players for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Starting off with edge defender Jack Sawyer, 80.6, and his partner in crime, another edge defender, JT Tuimoloau, also with an 80.6 grade. Quarterback Jordan Hancock, 77.8. Tight end Will Kacmarek with a 76.9. Quinn Judkins, 76.1. And Will Howard with a 66 grade. Now let's go over to Texas with their highest graded players in the loss. Edge defender and true freshman Colin Simmons with an 83 grade. Vernon Braun, the D tackle, 78.8. Another D tackle, Jermaine Lelay with a 74.1. Offensive tackle Kelvin Banks Jr., 70.5. Running back Trey Wisner with a 70.2 grade. And Quinn Ewers with a 42.9 grade in the loss. Dawn, for you, is that the whole story?
So all year we have said Texas has the best offensive line in the country, right? Kelvin Banks, Cameron Williams, Jake Majors, those front guys, those five guys up front. That's really the heart and soul of this team. More than Quinn, more than Wisner, more than the receivers. The defense, too, we'll get to the defense. And actually, if we're being honest, the defense was still really good in this game.
Oh, yeah.
They held Ohio State's run game down for the most part. Jeremiah Smith had one catch for 3 yards. Defensively, they only gave up 21 points.
Yeah.
That's a really darn good outcome for a defense if you're playing Ohio State. If Notre Dame gets that next week, they're going to feel pretty good about their chances.
Oh, yeah.
Texas offensive line, this will get tweaked a little bit through the review process, but the initial grade on their offensive line is a 61.8 as a unit. Obviously, their lowest of the season. Banks, Kelvin Banks, the only player above a 70.
Yeah.
Which is, a 70 is like solid.
It was a rough night for Cameron Williams.
It was a rough night for Cameron Williams, as you saw, especially with the Jack Sawyer play at the end. It was a rough night for the entire unit. That front four of Tuimoloau, Sawyer, Williams, Hamilton, they were the dominant unit in this game. It was an all-star matchup between Texas offensive line and Ohio State's defensive line, and Ohio State won that battle. Season high for this unit, 27.3 pressure rate allowed, which actually is still decent, but this team is usually under 20. They don't give up anything. We've talked about last year they were the second best pass protecting team in the country. This year you could argue they were the best, and I think it was even more concerning in the run game. On design carries, Texas had 9 yards before contact. Because you remember the Clemson game. They ran all over Clemson, right? But the last 2 weeks, this has been a thing. 9 yards, 9 designed rushing yards before contact in this game. Against Arizona State, 8 designed rushing yards before contact. And when they played the SEC title game against Georgia, it was something extremely low, too, like 15. This offensive line over the last 5 games has just not quite been the best O-line in the country. And they needed that level of play from them to win a national title. Before the SEC title, before the Texas A&M game, their grade as a unit was around an 85 overall, which is insane for a whole unit, an entire front five. Last 5 games, it's 68.5. They have played closer to decent football than elite football, and to get through this whole run, especially when we talk about there were monster defensive lines left and right in this 12-team playoff field. And the weird part is Arizona State was not one of them.
Yep.
And they won the battle up front for the most part, right? Especially in the run game. They did a fantastic job stopping the run against Texas. They needed the best offensive line in the country to show up, especially in this game against this D-line. Just didn't happen. And they've played closer to decent football. I know some guys have been banged up. Banks with the ankle. Cameron Williams was back after missing last week. Jake Majors was banged up. I believe it was in the Clemson game. You just have a team that needed its best unit offensively to play like its best unit, and they just were a little bit below that. And when you're going against Ohio State, you need the absolute best, because those 4 guys up front, they're freaks, man. 3 of them might be something close to first-round picks.
Yeah, very close to it. I mean, at least second-round picks, if not that.
But I'll tell you what, I think Sawyer's going round 1 for sure now.
He's a stud. He's and I said it. I tweeted it out after the strip sack that he returned for a touchdown. Like, that play is just a perfect encapsulation of Jack Sawyer as a prospect and Cameron Williams as a prospect. You got Jack Sawyer NFL ready right now. That guy is ready to play on Sundays right now. Cameron Williams has all the tools in the world, and I'm still very intrigued by his upside, the right tackle for Texas, but he's still raw. And because he hasn't really played a lot of football yet, and this is his first year really starting for Texas.
And who knows if he was 100% in this game.
That's true. That's a good point, too.
He's going to get out there because it's a semifinal, but he missed last week, and we don't know if he was anywhere near 100% moving in this game.
No, that's true. But it was still a rough night for him overall. But I just think it was like one guy who's NFL ready, one guy who I want to like sit for a year or two before I just throw him out there. And he might return to school for another year, honestly. We'll see with Cameron Williams. But it was just not a great performance by Texas O-line. And Dawn, that's the one thing that makes me sort of understand the second and goal from the one call. Because it's like Trevor Sickman pointed out in our group chat where he's just like, the one thing I'll say is like they weren't getting any push up the middle, and maybe that's why. Maybe Sark saw how bad the O-line was getting beat, and that's why
he mentioned that they didn't get any on first down.
Yeah,
that's tough.
I don't like the play call. Don't get me wrong. I hated the play call. But.
Yeah, those are the guys up front. I say it all the time: live and die with your best players. Yep. And we would sit here and say that those 5 guys have been their best players all season.
Yes,
give them one more shot.
Yeah,
give them one more shot. Even just run a sneak. Anything.
If there's any defense in the country you probably don't want to go outside on, it's probably Ohio State.
Well, who was the first guy to the ball?
Yeah, Caleb Downs. And then, of course, who was right after him? Lathan Ransom.
Of course.
Yeah, so it's just like those. Of course, those two guys would be screaming downhill and coming at him. And, of course, not even that, I don't think they make the play there, but Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer have been amazing at containing running backs all year. So it's like I would attack down the middle, but
I get what they were trying to do. They went with a pin pull, so essentially they cracked down with the receivers and tight ends, and they tried to pull Kelvin Banks around to the edge. Right? I get. So you take JT out of it from there, and second level guys have to make those plays.
Yeah.
But that's the gamble you take when you run a play like that to the edge in a situation like that. That can happen.
Yes.
And understanding that can happen. I think this is a game at all 4 of these teams that we saw in the semifinal. You don't want to be in all these obvious passing situations.
Yes.
And we saw a lot of them for both. I thought both teams on early downs very much struggled in this game to get it going. Ohio State felt like they were constantly in 2nd and 10. And Texas, Quinn Ewers had, I believe it was 47 dropbacks. I don't think that's ideal.
You know why it's not ideal? 39.9 passing grade.
Yeah.
39.9 passing grade. We said in the preview, Dolan, Quinn Ewers had to be the hero to win this game. Not only was he not the hero, he had one of the worst performances of his career from a grading standpoint, and even so, they still had a great chance to win this game because the defense was playing that well against Ohio State, but he just couldn't do it. 42.8 overall grade, second lowest of his career. The only one lower was the Georgia regular season game this year. He had 0 big-time throws, 3 turnover-worthy plays. His 3rd game this season with 3 or more turnover-worthy plays. He only had 1 in his career before this year. I mentioned before, the Texas O-line, maybe the worst pass blocker on Texas all year has been Quinn Ewers. His pocket presence has gotten his O-line into more trouble than, honestly, the O-line has gotten him into trouble. 2 of the 4 sacks that he took in this game, we charged to Quinn Ewers. It was his fault. His pocket presence is one of the biggest weaknesses right now on his scouting report. He's got to work on that a lot. Like I said, even so, the Texas defense stood on their heads and gave him an opportunity to win. Even if Quinn Ewers played average football, even if we saw, say, a 65 passing grade from Quinn Ewers, which you and I would have said before the game is not good enough to beat Ohio State. If you had a 65 passing grade, they might have won this game.
Their defense, I think it's going to get forgotten, the effort that Texas defense put in this game.
Yeah.
They were terrific. Considering the team that they were playing and how hot they were coming into it, they gave up 21 points and held Jeremiah to 3 yards and held down the running game pretty well outside of a couple of moments. Their defense was spectacular for the most part in this game. I think obviously the most egregious mistake was the screen to Henderson right before halftime. But I think part of that was a play calling. Chip Kelly.
It is bad play call from Kwiatkowski.
Chip Kelly dialed it up. They were so afraid of the deep ball that then the screen and Henderson gets the momentum and it all works the same. But I want to mention something with Ewers going back to the offensive line part too. Is you look at the splits under pressure here, like you mentioned, and the fumble also at the end is baked into this. But under pressure, 5 for 15. Did have, I believe, the second touchdown to Jaden Blue against the 0 blitz. 26.9 passing grade.
Yep.
And that's where it came from here is Ohio State. And there were times that Jim Knowles dialed it up. There's times where he sent 4 because he's got one of the best front 4s in the country.
Yep.
And Ewers, once he got under pressure and things got out of structure, there was just nothing there. It was nothing there. And even, again, his best throw, the touchdown to Blue, busted coverage. We'll figure out on the back end who busted the coverage, and it was a zero blitz, and somebody just forgot to cover Jaden Blue. That's pretty much all he had all night, was that one play under pressure. Otherwise, when he was under pressure, it was a mess.
And listen, he couldn't come through in what's most likely his final collegiate game. He told Pete Thamel before the game that he's most likely declaring for the NFL draft. And there's a lot of rumors right now. I think there's the report of the $6 million offer he's got from unknown school right now. If I'm him, I'm taking that and running if I'm him, honestly. But probably his final collegiate game is definitely his final game at Texas. And I'm sure a lot of Texas fans after this game are very excited about the Arch Manning era in Austin. Just an incredibly disappointing season for him. Even if he played at last year's form, Dalton, Texas might have won the national championship, honestly. I think he had like an 85 passing grade last year. He's got like a 68 passing grade this year. It has been a really, really disappointing year for Quinn Ewers, and I think there's a lot of questions to answer for him in the NFL draft process. It's rough, and one of the biggest game of the year for them. They needed Quinn Ewers to even play at an average level, and he put in one of the worst performances of his career.
I just think his whole career, if he is going to the NFL here, it kind of like this game, there were moments.
Yeah, there were moments.
Moments that make you believe, right? The two Alabama games. Listen, we were at the Michigan game in week 2.
The Jaden Blue touchdown throw in this game was good. It was a really nice throw.
No, there are moments with Quinn where you go, oh, yeah.
That's why he's one of the highest rated quarterbacks ever out of high school.
When we watched him at Michigan, that was back in week 2. We left that game and we were like, oh, this might be real now.
Yeah.
He just went into the big house and just carved him to shreds. And you mentioned the pocket presence. That was the
incredible.
Best. That game was the best I'd ever seen him move in the pocket.
One of the best I've ever seen any quarterback this year move in the pocket.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you look at some moments like the SEC title game. First half, he was fantastic, and they were dropping the ball. Second half, not so much. Arizona State game. First drive is great. Middle chunk of the game, not great. Overtime, fantastic. It's just you have to put it together for 60 minutes.
Yeah.
And Quinn, even in this game, there was a couple throws. I'm like, oh, he's going to get him. We're coming back. Here we go. He's going to do it now. He's going to overcome it. And again, the fumble. Sawyer beat Williams so quick around the corner. I don't know what Quinn could have done about that.
No, I don't really charge Quinn at all.
Really, honestly, a whole lot of nothing he could have done about that. But you're talking about a guy. I think that's the question for me. It's always been the question is consistency. Because he gives us one or two huge games a year where you're like, wow, that's an NFL quarterback. And then there's long stretches where it's not much out of structure, like you mentioned. And it's just, is there enough? Is there enough consistency in there to do this at an NFL level? So we'll see. If he says he's declaring, then someone will take the gamble on him in the draft. But there's still plenty to work on. And I think 3 years into it, that much is obvious. You mentioned it right now, 68.8 passing grade for the season. It's up and down with him.
Yeah,
and I think the question is going to be, can he ever put it together for 60 minutes on a consistent basis?
60 minutes and just string together good weeks, man. Because it feels like he has a great game, one game, and the very next week against, I remember last year when he was unbelievable against Alabama in that big win for Texas. Very next week against Wyoming, he had a rough one. It was like, what the heck are we doing out here, man? So it's just very inconsistent football from Quinn Ewers because it's so frustrating. Because some quarterbacks, listen, there's some quarterbacks in college football, they're not very good. Right, there's guys who are like, they just can't do it. Quinn Ewers, can do it, which is why I think it's so frustrating watching him at times. You're like, I know somewhere in there you have the capability of leading this team to a victory, but it just doesn't happen all the time. And there's some games where he looks amazing against incredible defenses, and other games against well below average defenses where he just does not show up at all. So it's like that inconsistency, I think, is maddening in his tape, and it's going to be a lot of questions for him to answer in the NFL draft process, honestly. And we'll see if he does declare for the NFL draft or if he takes that offer, if there is an offer out there in the transfer portal. If I'm advising him and that is a real offer, take it. That's way more than you make in the NFL next year. Way more. So we'll see what happens to Quinn Ewers, but I think we could all agree that was probably the last game of him at Texas. And then now the Arch Manning era will begin. Let's get into more about Ohio State, though, Dawn. Most impressive part for you in this victory?
I think, for as much the last couple weeks as we've talked about their defense, and in this game it's Jack Sawyer and Will Howard making throws and Jeremiah Smith and everything that's going on, all the star power. I think, first of all, there's a group of role players here who've played such a huge part in them getting here. I think about guys like Jordan Hancock making the adjustments that we talked about in their coverages and playing a little more safety. A guy like Carnell Tate leading them in receiving last night against arguably the best secondary in the country when Ibuka got a hot start and then went quiet and Smith had nothing all night. And, a guy like G. Scott playing the role. But I think maybe as valuable as any player on this team through this run has been Donovan Jackson.
Yeah.
We've talked the entire second half of the season since Josh Simmons got hurt, Ohio State's offensive line is going to make or break this thing. And they made the move to Donovan Jackson moving out to left tackle after Simmons got hurt and his backup got hurt, right? Was it Michalski?
Yeah.
Right. Jackson, it took him some time. Obviously, on the fly, it's going to take him some time. But in these 3 playoff games, I'm not sure anyone's been more valuable than him. And you look at, in this game, 86.2 pass blocking grade against, you're talking about Colin Simmons, you're talking about Barron Sorrell, you're talking about the freaks that Texas has. You're talking about trying to run block guys like Alfred Collins. No pressures. Not a single pressure he allowed in this game. This is a guard playing left tackle. Okay? Decent run blocking, 65.6. 3 playoff games against 3 stupidly talented defensive lines, right? Tennessee, Oregon, Texas. He's given up 1 pressure to James Pierce Jr.
Yeah.
That's it. 1 hurry to James Pierce Jr. in 3 full games as a guard playing left tackle on a team that we expected, if they're going to fall, it's going to be because of their offensive line, because they can't run between the tackles, and they didn't do it a whole lot in this game because you got freaks in there, Collins and Broughton and those guys. And we're not sure if they can pass protect against these teams. And Donovan Jackson has played, through this run, 75.4 grade across these 3 games against three teams.
Yeah.
With a couple weeks to prepare and just get more reps in practice. And you're facing James Pierce Jr. and Birch and Uiagalelei from Oregon and Sorrell and Simmons and everything Texas has.
Joshua Joseph's at Tennessee as well, yeah.
Donovan Jackson has been a massive, massive X factor here that needs to get talked about as valuable a piece as Sawyer or Jeremiah or any of these other guys have been throughout this playoff run. We said it from the outset. I picked Tennessee to beat them because I was like, I don't think they can block them. I don't know who they can block right now because it was awful down the stretch, and they're just trying to cobble it together.
Well, the game before against Michigan, they lost because of the O-line.
They lost strictly because they couldn't block. And obviously no one can block Michigan, but there ain't too big a drop-off from Michigan, who's probably the best D-line in the country, to Tennessee, Oregon, Texas is like right behind them, along with Ohio State's. These are like some of the top 6 or 7 D-lines in the country that they've been going through. And yet they've been able to do it and get great pass protection. And I think the biggest piece of that, Jackson being able to move from guard out to tackle. And he's going to play guard, I think, in the NFL.
Yes.
There was bound to be a list of guys who raised their draft stock big time through this playoff run for any team, right? Cam Scatteraboo and Xavier Watson. Donovan Jackson, even for just what he's doing at tackle, he's probably going to be – I think he's now going to be the first guard taken in this draft.
I would, yeah.
For to be able to do that, and even for a team, just the value of in a pinch, okay, maybe we can put him at tackle in an emergency situation, but to be able to do this at left tackle when he wasn't supposed to be playing it, obviously, and Josh Simmons, a great player, potential first-round pick, gets hurt, and Jackson went through it, man. He went through it. We watched him against Penn State. He was trying to block Abdul Carter. He stood no chance.
Yeah.
Which nobody does, admittedly. But for him to perform the way he has in these 3 playoff games, it's as valuable as anything that's happened on Ohio State's team. As any player has played, I think it's equally as valuable to not have to worry about a left tackle when you literally didn't have one. You're playing a guard at left tackle, and as well as he's played, a phenomenal job in this playoff run. I think he's been so important, and we said it. If they can find a way to get the offensive line together, they can win the whole thing.
Yeah.
They have found a way.
Yeah.
And it's rolling now. Not only are they playing survivable ball, they're playing pretty good ball, at least average ball, with a unit that they are keeping together with Band-Aids. And Jackson is the biggest reason for it.
He has been unbelievable. It's a great call up by you. And not only has his play on the field been great, he's clearly one of the leaders of this team. He's there. He's a senior now. Not only with Josh Simmons going down, your center, Seth McLaughlin, goes down. And usually the center is the guy calling out the protections and all that. Donovan Jackson is helping out that O-line in that respect as well. So he is the clear leader of that offensive line, and he's leading them off the field and on the field with his plays. A great call out by you. And listen, you look at a guy like him, and I remember watching the Dallas Cowboys a few years ago when Tyron Smith got hurt, and they put Zach Martin out at tackle. And people were like, well, this is not going to work. Zach Martin, one of the best guards in the league, all of a sudden was like a really good left tackle for the Cowboys. And like some guys are just really good at playing offensive line. And Donovan Jackson is just a really, really good offensive lineman. And listen, with him playing tackle, you would think speed rushers like James Pierce Jr. and Colin Simmons would have a massive advantage because usually in guard, you're protecting in a phone booth. When you have a guy like who's a speed like that, like James Pierce Jr. or Colin Simmons, they have a big advantage to get outside on you. And they couldn't do it against him. Donovan Jackson, just a great call out by you. He's been a superstar for them.
And the impact on the team, real quick. Think about this. In this game against this defense, this was their second best pass blocking grade as a team since Josh Simmons got hurt. The only other game that was slightly higher was when they played Purdue, who was the worst team in the Big Ten. I mean, that's the level they've gotten to where this is essentially the best game they've played as an offensive line, at least in pass protection. I would say on the whole, actually. This is the best game their offensive line has played since Josh Simmons got hurt, and it came against what I would argue now is the second best defense in the country because they, for multiple reasons, have the best defense in the country, and they've earned that title.
And honestly, a big factor that could help Donovan Jackson in making the transition to tackle is the fact that he has to go against Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau in practice every day. And my most impressive part is those two right there, man. These edges for Ohio State were dominant. Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, not only did they both have 80-plus grades, they only did it against elite competition. Kelvin Banks Jr. and Cameron Williams, many would argue, is the best offensive tackle duo in college football. Both of them are first-round prospects on PFF's big board right now. But Jack Sawyer had a 90.1 pass rushing grade in this game, 5 pressures, 3 quarterback hits, and a game-sealing strip sack on 4th and goal, which he returned for an 87-yard touchdown against his former roommate at Ohio State, Quinn Ewers, as well. He was outstanding as a pass rusher. JT Tuimoloau, also really good as a pass rusher. He had 2 sacks and 3 pressures in this game, but also even better as a run defender. 80.3 run defense grade, 3 run defense stops, 2 tackles for loss or no gain. Both these guys, Sawyer and Tuimoloau, were top 5 overall recruits in the 2021 high school class. Now they're both seniors and leaders of this Buckeye defense. Everyone in that defense and everyone really on the team kind of follows their lead, and they both were incredible. And again, I just want to reemphasize, they were playing Kelvin Banks Jr. and Cameron Williams, 2 projected first-round picks in the NFL draft, and Sawyer and Tuimoloau were dominating out there. So I want to shout out them because I was just so impressed by those 2 specifically on this Ohio State defense. Everyone on the defense was great, but those 2 specifically, considering their assignment in this game against those 2 tackles, they were both outstanding.
And I want to point out just 2 other guys here on their defense because the top 4 players, and I think it represents this very well, the top 4 players on Ohio State's defense. You're talking Sawyer 1 and Tuimoloau 3 in this game, and 2 and 4, Jordan Hancock, Caleb Downs. And I think that's everything that we know Ohio State to be this year. You've got an elite defensive line led by those 2 edge guys. In the last 2 weeks, they've been fantastic. And again, Jordan Hancock, this is somebody who needs more recognition for the role that he plays, especially with the way they've been calling defenses lately. All year, he was mainly they put him in the slot. He was their slot corner. That was his job. He'd play the flat or he'd play the slot and the man, right? For him to move back and forth now, and you could see it last night too, deep half, in the slot, playing down low, 20 snaps at free safety, 11 as a strong safety, 31 in the slot. So you're basically 50-50ing between the slot and safety. And then Caleb Downs, I mean, what more can we say about him, honestly? And next year, we're really going to sit here and argue next year about who's the best returning player in the country. Is it Jeremiah Smith or is it Caleb Downs? Because Caleb, I mean, it feels like, I don't know the last time we went into a season, maybe Kyle Hamilton, and Hamilton didn't even end up going top 10. It was weird that he fell, I think, to 14.
He should not have ever fallen that far.
But it feels like next year we walk in thinking Caleb Downs as a safety is a top 10 player. In next year's draft.
He'll be a top 5 on my big board for sure.
The number, he's always on the football.
Yeah.
Always. And obviously the interception at the very end, he makes a great read on it. But you mentioned the toss sweep on 2nd and goal at the 1. He's the first one to the ball. He just flies all over the place, and he rose the middle of the field. And there was so often, last night he was even, when Gunnar Helm, when Texas is trying to sneak Gunnar Helm on those crossing routes like they always do.
Yeah.
It's Caleb Downs. Like, it's just he is the key to their entire secondary and everything that he can do, and Hancock moving around every other coverage that Jim Knowles can run. I think it's just such a good representation of Ohio State as a defense, that those 4 players right now were the 4 highest graded guys in this game.
Absolutely. So Ohio State taking down Texas in the Cotton Bowl. Ohio State now moving on to play Notre Dame in the national championship game. Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.